Hello everyone, I'm your CAD tutor, and this is chapter 1 of a series of videos where I will teach you the basics of CAD and even to master modeling techniques in SolidWorks. The first things I want to go over are part modeling, or at least basic part modeling. And the very first step into modeling any part is by creating a sketch. So we're going to go ahead and create a sketch. I'm currently using SolidWorks 2016. However, if you're using older versions, 2015, 2014, or even the most recent 2018, most of these buttons and features will apply. If you do not find the correct button or selection or option in your own version, please let me know and I'll be sure to get back to you with the solution. So we're going to go ahead and create a new file. So we go to File, New, and we're going to select Part. It's pre-selected by default on SolidWorks. Part is the very first one he shows up selected. However, you can create assemblies or drawings. But in order to create an assembly or a drawing, you need a part, at the very least a single part, to create an assembly or a drawing. So you click OK. And now we have our modeling space, which is completely empty here. You can see that when I hover over the planes, it selects them temporarily while I'm hovering over that option. However, I can select all three, so you can see the generated three-dimensional space that's created. And so we're going to pick one of these planes as our starting point, as our starting reference plane, to create our very first sketch. The sketch of whatever part you're designing, when designing your part, the sketch that you create, the very first sketch you create, has to be based on what makes most sense when creating that component. For instance, if I'm modeling a coffee mug essentially is a hollowed out cylinder. So I would pick the top plane to create a circle. Then I would extrude that circle to create a cylinder. And then I would hollow out that cylinder to create essentially a cup or a mug. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to select the top plane. I'm going to right click on the top plane and click on the very first option at the top left that pops up. It says Sketch right next to this eye. So I click on Sketch, and immediately by default SolidWorks pans over to the direct view, the front dead-on view to that plane that you pick. If I had picked the front plane, we would be looking at the front plane top down or directly forward. So the plane has been selected. Now on my sketch tab here, I have different options to create my geometry. Most of the geometry creation options are on this square that I'm hovering over. From line to circles to splines to rectangles to arcs, ellipses, slots, polygons, and curves or fillets. Then we have points, planes, and text that you can add to any of your sketches. Sometimes you want to engrave your part, and this becomes very, very handy. Beyond this, there's other options that will come in handy once you have already created a sketch, but they're part of the sketch tab. The very first thing we do once we create our geometry will be to dimension. So we have the Smart Dimension button here. If you click on the down arrow, there's multiple options to dimensioning, but we'll get to that later. The very first thing you need to know is that we'll use these options here, these buttons, to create our geometry. So we'll go ahead and I'll create a circle. So I'll create a circle. So when creating a circle, by default, the way that you create a circle is by picking the center point of your circle and working outwards radially to whatever point you want. As you're going outwards, so I'll select my center point. I'll just pick the origin that's highlighted by those red arrows. I clicked on the origin. Now I'll move in radially out, and as you can see, as I'm moving out, the radius given in inches, at least for my own settings, is increasing 1.63, 1.86. However, regardless of where you end up with your circle, it's pretty irrelevant regarding the dimension that you'll give it. So I can, if I want a 10-inch radius circle, I can still leave it at 0.89 and change it to 10 inches. But I'm just gonna leave it somewhere where it's more visible. Again, it doesn't matter. So I click on the escape key on my keyboard just so that it doesn't automatically stay selected. I don't want to see this. This is a lot of options that let you change the radius of your circle in this case, or even fix it. If you don't really care about the dimension and you just want to fix it where it is, you can click on this fix button. But I don't want to do that yet. What we're going to do is we're going to dimension it. Just one thing to notice is that when I dimension it, you will see that currently this circle is blue. Whenever your geometry, whenever your sketch is the color blue, that means that it's undefined, meaning that you still haven't fully defined it, or that you're missing a dimension to fully define your sketch. So you can see that at the bottom here it says underdefined, meaning that I can move this up and in and out. It's now fully defined. The moment you define it, I won't be able to do this. So given that I wanted a mug, I'll pick the outer diameter of a mug that I'm thinking to be 3 inches, maybe 4 inches. So I'll say 4 inches. So I selected the arc, and I just use my keyboard and I say 4. I can type in IN for inches, but because inches is my default, it would immediately go to 4 inches. If I wanted this to be in millimeters, because my default is standard is in inches, I would have to actually type in 4 mm, and that would give me millimeters, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to do 4 inches. As you can see, it tells you right here 4 inches. So this, in case you guys don't know, this little circle with a / across it is the diameter symbol, meaning that it is denoting, it is annotating a circular surface. So now that we have our 4 inches, I will go ahead and exit my sketch. As you can see, the sketch turned black, meaning that it's fully defined. Another way of confirming that is by looking at the bottom here, the bottom right, it says fully defined. So now if I even try to drag it, I can't. It won't let me because it's defined to 4 inches and only 4 inches. So now I'm going to exit my sketch. And now it's this grayed out sketch in space that's a two-dimensional in a two-dimensional space. So I'm going to, by default, whenever you finish your sketch, it's highlighted like this with this light blue, sky blue color, meaning that whatever operation you select next will take into account this selected circle. So I'm going to extrude it into a cylinder. It's already selected. In case it's not, in case you clicked out here and it's gray, if you try to create your operation, your extrusion operation, it won't work. You have to select the sketch that you want to work with. So I'm selecting it, sketch 1, and then I'm going to the features tab. So if you go to the top left, there's the features tab. And I'm going to click the very first option that I see, extruded boss / base. So now, by default, it picks a random number, just 0.1 inches. Again, this is going to be a mug, so I'll pick the height of it to be 4.5 inches. So I have several options here. You see there's a bunch of options here, from sketch plane, from surface, from vertex, from offset. We're always going to, for the most part, we're going to select from sketch plane because it's what we actually sketched on here in sketch number 1. The direction, if I want my mug to be upwards, I can actually drag this arrow so that it looks for visual purposes. If I want my mug to be reversed, or the extrusion to be reversed, I click on this reverse button, and now it'll be the opposite direction. This doesn't apply too much for what we're doing right now, but for other applications, it could be useful to know which direction you picked your initial extrusion, and the plane that it's picking for its direction is the top plane that we originally selected. See, if I hover over the top plane, you can see that that's what it's using as its initial plane. So this is if you're going to select a blind extrusion, meaning that it doesn't go to infinity, and it's not set like a hole that it's a through hole, but it's actually an extrusion that gets to a certain point. In this case, blind, meaning that it goes from a plane to a certain number, and I think I said 4 inches. So I can say 4, change it to 4, and that gives me a blind extrusion to 4 inches. However, I want the length to be 4, but I don't want it to grow from the top plane. I actually want this mug to be in the very middle of my top plane. So I'm going to pick mid plane. So if you click on the direction button here, you see the blind, click on the down arrow, and there's several different options. I'm going to pick mid plane. That means that now it is the top plane that is going to be selected as the middle plane. And now I'm just going to click on the check mark. Now we have our cylinder. Now that we have our cylinder, now we can go and continue with our next operation, which is hollowing it out. Right now it's just a solid cylinder. So I'm going to pick the top surface to create my sketch. To hollow this out, there's several options that SolidWorks offers. You can use a shell option, where it essentially shells out your entire body to whatever thickness you give it to. But we'll talk about that more in detail in later videos. To keep it simple and to continue reinforcing the exercise of extrusion, not just bosses but now cuts and sketches, I will go ahead and create a circle and use my circle sketch as my initial sketch to hollow out this cylinder. So I'll pick the top surface. You can still pick the initial planes that you had originally, but now I have a solid body that I can use to pick surfaces to create sketches on. So I will pick the top surface. It immediately pops up this menu to allow you to do several options. If it doesn't, you can just simply click on the top on whatever surface you want to work on, and then you can go to your sketch tab and click on sketch. And now it's already an open sketch. So if SolidWorks doesn't immediately give you the front view, you can use your keyboard and use the keys Control and the space bar, press them at the same time, and it gives you this sort of chamfered cube that allows you to pick whichever surface you want to view your object, your body, from that angle. So I'm going to pick the top surface because I want to view my sketch dead on. So I'll click on the top surface and it shows me the face that I want to be seen. So now, because I wanted a circle, I'm going to select my circle, select the origin, because I know that the other circle, the center of the other circle is also the origin. So I want both circles to be concentric. You wouldn't want to have a mug where the inside the inside of your mug is offset from the outside. It would be weird, maybe if it was a very artsy mug. But we're gonna select again a random dimension. It could be really small, it could be really large. As a matter of fact, it could even be outside of your outer diameter, because you're going to give it a dimension. The moment you dimension it, it'll move to where it should be. Now, off the top of my head, I don't really know what the inside of a mug should be. However, using just visually by looking at it, I can tell that it would be somewhere around here. Really depends on how this is manufactured. If this is pottery turned on a wheel, that they can vary on thickness of wall. So I'm going to select the inside, and it's giving me 3.39. So if I want to pick a round number, I usually want to stick with round numbers. That being 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 inch, 3/8 of an inch, 1/2 an inch, 5/8, and so on. 3/4, a full inch, 7/8. So numbers that are 1/8 of an inch in increments of 1/8 of an inch, at least in the when using inches. When using metric, well, you want to stay with more round numbers, 5, 10s, and so on and so forth. So I'm at 3.39. If I pick 3.5, it would probably be too big, so I'll pick 3.5. I think my outside was 3.5. So the outside's 4. So 3.5 doesn't seem to be that bad, so we can stick with 3.5. So now I'll end my sketch. And now we have that. Given that we already created an initial sketch with the same type of diameter dimensioning, I'm going to use a different type of dimensioning. So I'll go to my sketch again, right click on it, and go to the top left, edit sketch. I'm going to edit that sketch. And I'm not going to use diameter as my way of dimensioning the inside, because I don't really care what the diameter is. What I care, maybe, depending on who's making this, what I care is the wall thickness. And I want the wall thickness to be, say, 1/4 inch. So what I'll do is I use, again, Smart Dimension, and I'll pick the outside edge to my sketch. And now it's selecting the thickness. And I said I wanted to be 1/4 inch, so 0.25. So now I'm using that as my way of dimensioning. And as you can see, the circle turned black, meaning that it is fully defined. A circle only really needs diameter or radius. In this case, the radius is defined since you already know that the outside diameter is defined. By giving it a thickness, that circle becomes defined. And if out of curiosity you want to know what this inner dimension is, you can select it, except it'll give you a warning message saying, hey, this geometry, the circles, has already been defined. You can leave that dimension there, but it'll just be as a reference dimension, and it'll be a grayed out dimension. I didn't get the message. I usually clear them out so that they don't show up again, but you may get a message that says this has already been defined. So it shows as a grayed out dimension, reminding you it's a reference dimension, just so you know, okay, it's 3.5 inches ID, or inner diameter. So I'm going to exit, and now I have my inner sketch. So I'm going to go to my features again, my features tab on the top left, and now it's going to be an extrusion, but it's not going to be a boss or a base, it's going to be a cut. So I'm going to use the extruded cut option. So immediately the extrusion option selects the same dimension that it was selected previously. So the last time I used the extruded feature, I selected 4 inches because that's how I wanted my mug to, how tall I wanted my mug to be. But I don't want this to be a 4-inch hole, otherwise it would just be a toilet paper roll. It's not a mug, but I wanted it to be a mug, so I wanted to have a bottom base. So I'll give it a maybe a 1/2 inch bottom, so I'll say 3.5. So as you can see, it gives you this sort of transparency view where you can see the yellow circle. That's how far the cut will go. So once I have selected my blind cut of 3.5 inches, you are going to select OK. Now there you have it. You have a very simplistic mug, cup, whatever you want to call it. I will add a couple more features to make it look a little bit more like a realistic mug. and just features that help just consumer products in general. For instance, in reality, you wouldn't want to be putting your lips around a really sharp edge like this, even if it was out of clay or porcelain or plastic, anything sharp. This is theoretically a perfectly sharp corner, and you wouldn't want to have this. In reality, that's not even possible, but if you manufacture this, it would come as sharp as you have indicated it to be, as sharp as they possibly can. So you want to add rounds or fillets to some of your features. In general, you want to add rounds to everything, also to reduce stress concentrations on your part that could cause them to break, to crack. So there's under part of your features tab, you have your fillet option. So there's a fillet option here that I can click on. I will click on that, and I will add a fillet to the outside of this rim. 0.1 inches seems a little too much. It seems like it's eating a lot of my complete surface, so I will select maybe half of that, 0.05. That seems better. So I'll click OK. And maybe the inside I also want a fillet, but perhaps the inside can be a little smaller than 0.05, perhaps 0.25, given that you don't directly place your mouse. So these are things you have to consider when designing, so that your design, as you're designing, you're taking into account everything that your part will go through, from manufacturing, how easily manufacturable will this be, how the volume that this can produce, its reliability when it goes out in the field. Will what's this for? Is this for hot liquids or is it for cold liquids? So have you picked the right material for it? So a lot of these things you have to consider when designing, and one of those is designing the right fillets. So I also want the inside to have fillets, but I want more than that, so I'll just say 0.1. Let's go with 0.25. I feel generous today. And you can select multiple edges. You don't have to select one at a time. I've been selecting one at a time because each edge I've been selecting has been different than the previous one in terms of value. The first one was 0.05. The other one was 0.025, so it was smaller. I couldn't pick the same one, but in this case, I'm going to select the inside of my mug, the bottom inside, and the outside edge, the bottom outside edge, to be the same one, to be 0.25. Let's see what that looks like. So it gives you this yellowed out preview. It looks good enough. So I want both of them to be a 1/4 inch. So I select both, and then I click OK. So there I have it. I have my mug, and you can use a cross-sectional view to see what it looks like from the inside, to see how all the radii look. So this is on this upper panel. You have several options. One of them is this sawed off cylinder. That's a section view. You click on that, and it automatically picks one of your 3 main planes. It can be anything, but in this case it picked the front plane, which is good enough for us. So I'll click OK, and I can rotate my view and see that, yeah, it looks good from a cross-sectional view. So this is just a view. It's not an actual feature. So I didn't actually saw my part in half. I'm just temporarily sectioning it so I can see what it looks like from the inside. So I can click on the section view again, and now I have finalized my part. So now I'm going to go ahead and save my part. So I go to File, Save As, and I will just save it as mug or coffee mug. Now you have a completed part, and this is one of the most simplistic components that you can create. So we went over sketches, dimensioning sketches, and constraints. So now the next few chapters will get into more details on creating additional sketches, extrusions on top of other components, other surfaces. You want to have a block or a cube or spirals or repeated features and patterns, and we'll go over those things there. If you liked this video, you know what to do. And if you'd like to be notified when the next video is out, don't forget to subscribe. And that's how you'll be notified. Thank you for watching.